Hello and welcome back. Ladies and gentlemen, it took almost the entire fantasy season, but Brandon Montour is finally back to being the dominant fantasy player that he was last year. This past week, 3 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, 4 power play points, 11 shots, 4 hits, a game winner, and to top it all off, he's got 5 multi-point games in his last 7. So this is great news for us Montour owners who have held on all year through the IR stage and all the way through the season till now. And Florida does have a decent schedule this week. So what does that mean for week 21 in fantasy? Well, let's do as we always do and jump right into the schedule. Now we've got a lot to cover. 52 games this week, the usual Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday heavy nights, Monday and Sunday relatively light depending on how you categorize it, 6 games, 5 games. But there's enough there to pick from, which is nice. Now I see a few advantageous schedules and a few that you can pick from, but are heavier in terms of Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday stuff. So that's what this break here is. So at the top, we've got Arizona with a couple of really decent opponents playing Chicago twice, and they play on a Friday and a Sunday. So they get that light night back-to-back, not back-to-back, but the consecutive light nights there. You also have Calgary with 2 relative light nights. You've got Monday against Seattle. You've got Sunday at Carolina. The only problem with Calgary is they do have a bunch of difficult games. Tampa Bay has not been playing well, but they need to start if they're going to make a playoff push. The trade deadline's on Friday, so keep that in mind with some of your Calgary ads, as those guys might get traded. Guy like Hanifin, who we'll touch on, could be gone by Friday. But they do have this weekend back-to-back, which is going to be very difficult. 2 very good teams that they're going to have to play after the trade deadline, after all that emotion, but they do have that Monday and that Sunday light night game. Up next, you have Nashville. They are rolling right now. I believe they've won 7 in a row. They have a relatively easy schedule in terms of opponents on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Nobody in the playoffs, everybody kind of the weaker teams in the Eastern Conference. And then they've also got a bubble team in Minnesota on Sunday, which is their light night game. So a little bit you can pick from there, and we'll get into some of those guys. And then you also have Chicago. Nobody wants Blackhawks, but there's 2 guys that I can think of that I will mention in the Deep League Streamer section of the video, and we'll get into some of the guys who can get you some Bedard exposure. Down here, we've got a number of really difficult games. Boston and Toronto play each other twice this week. You also have Pittsburgh with Boston and Edmonton back-to-back on the weekend. A lot of these teams are playing only 1 light night, a bunch of back-to-backs, so there may be some goaltending implications, but let's just jump right into the best schedule this week and try to find some guys from the Arizona Coyotes. Now, to start it off, a lot of these guys are ownable. The highest owned player is Keller at 93%. You have Dursey at 67%, and then it drops off, and you have a number of guys that are available. We'll start it off with some of the hotter players. You have Matias Maccelli, 9 points in his last 7 games, 3 of those on the power play. He's relatively hot, 13% owned, left wing, single position. Normally a heavy assist guy, but he has been shooting a little bit more and scoring some goals lately, so that's nice to see. One of the usual suspects that we always come back to is Nick Schmaltz. 25% owned, center right wing, which is nice to have that dual position eligibility. He's got 5 points, 3 goals, 2 assists in his last 4 games, 3 of those coming on the power play. That is nice to see. So if you picked him up for the Friday, Sunday light night schedule this past week, hopefully you keep him for week 21 as well. And then you have Dylan Guenther, who I debated picking up on Friday. I knew he played well against Ottawa. He had a good track record there, and he came through with a goal and an assist. He's got 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, 3 of those on the power play in his last 5 games, and he's only 3% owned, so that is nice to see. As we look at their hub, you can see a lot of those guys are closer to the top. The number 1 guy that I didn't mention is Lawson Krause. He's got no points in his last 4 or 5 games, but he is relatively complete in terms of 2.17 hits per game, a little bit of shot blocking as well, some shot volume, 2.31 shots per game, and some goal scoring as well. He's got 20 goals in 59 games, so he's another option for you. I believe he's 42% owned. And then you also have a guy that I picked up, Nick Bjugstad. He is 12% owned, so really low ownership. You're not going to get a lot of offense, only half a point per game, but you do get above 2 shots per game on average, 1.5 hits per game, a couple of blocks, basically 2/3 of a block every game, and you get a little bit of coverage everywhere else. He is getting some power play time as well. There are a couple of other guys that you could look at. You have Logan Cooley, who's at 14%. He's a little bit further down here, a little bit less consistent, but does get some power play time, which is nice to see. Jason Zucker is right around that same ownership percentage level. I believe he's either 9 or 10% owned. He's usually good for some power play points. He used to be good for goal scoring, and he is still good for hitting 1.46 hits per game. And then on top of that, you also have Alexander Kerfoot, center left wing. He's around 10% owned. He's a little bit higher up here on the hub, and he's been gaining basically back since December, improving his rating week over week pretty much consistently from that point on, getting some shot blocks, a little bit of power play time, and some assists, but not a lot of shot volume or goal scoring. Hopefully that covers just about everybody on the Arizona Coyotes, because there's a ton of guys that are available on the wire. Kind of wanted to touch on as many as I could. Obviously, Dursey is your best ad, but he is 67% owned. If he's available, go out and pick him up. He's quarterbacking that power play, gets a ton of shot blocks as well, just doesn't hit quite a bit. And then he is kind of trending downward since about a month and a half ago. Which isn't great to see, but the whole team has been slumping for that entire time. They went winless for, I believe it was 11 or 12 games in a row. I don't know how that's going to play itself out, but they did get a win to end that streak, so hopefully this is them turning a page. Speaking of turning the page, we will look at the Calgary Flames next. This is a team that you can grab some guys before the Friday trade deadline. They do have that weekend back-to-back. As you can see down there, that is a difficult schedule after the trade deadline. They play 3 and 4 heading into and out of the trade deadline, so that's interesting to note. And we will start it off by talking about Noah Hanifin. 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points, 2 of those on the power play in just his last 3 games, and he will absolutely be gone by Friday. So if you're in a shallow league and if you can go out and get Hanifin, and you're hoping to get that bounce from him leaving the Calgary Flames, I don't know how much of a bounce there will be, because he's been playing incredible hockey all year long for the Flames. He's been one of their top defensemen, and he's the most coveted guy at the trade deadline, so who knows if he's going to start improving off of these numbers. But if you want, you can grab him for that Monday light night and hold him into that game against Tampa Bay, and then hopefully out of the trade deadline, he goes somewhere that is preferable to your lineup. Now, also, you have a couple of other options here that are probably not getting traded, because Sharon Govich just came over this past offseason. He's 23% owned, 3 position eligible, which is really nice to have, 5 points in his last 5 games. You also have Andrew Mangiapane, only 13% owned, dual eligible, 5 points in his last 5 games, but he's got 8 hits in there as well. Here you can see why Hanifin has been so good all season long. Really good goal production, 96th percentile. I don't know why it just freaked out right there, but he's been scoring a ton of goals. So he's got 11 on the season, which is really good for a defenseman. About 2 shots per game, getting some power play time, getting some assists. The hits and blocks aren't crazy high, but 1.45 blocks per game, and he's been trending up basically since December 11th, having a little bit of a plateau here heading into the trade deadline. Maybe he's a little nervous about where he's going to go, but 64% owned, he's probably not there for you. But if he is and you want to get out in front of that, now would be the time to do so. And then we just mentioned Sharon Govich and Mangiapane. They are right here back-to-back in the mid-60 range. You can see Sharon Govich, he's a goal scorer, so in that, I believe, 5 points in 5 games, he does have a hat trick in there. He scored a game winner last night in a beautiful come-from-behind win on Mika Kiprasov's jersey retirement night. So he's a goal scorer. They're going to be streaky. He'll go a couple games where he won't do anything, and then he'll pop off for a bunch of goals and maybe a power play point or 2. He's 90th percentile in goals, so that's the main reason you'd own him, and he does get some decent shot volume and some power play time as well. He's currently playing with Jonathan Huberdeau, so that has been a duo that they seem to like. They have Dryden Hunt on that line, but he is also first power play unit, so that's nice to see as well. And then you also have Mangiapane, 13% owned, who we went over briefly. A little bit lower shot volume. That used to be a lot higher in years past. He's come down from that, but he is improving over the last number of weeks, so he has been putting up really decent numbers. Blake Coleman is way more owned up. He's red hot, though. If you're finding anybody that can play with Blake Coleman, that would be a good idea to add somebody from his line. Right now, he's got 25 goals in 60 games. That's 92nd percentile there. The shot volume is pretty decent, and he hits a little bit. But as I just mentioned, he's around 76% owned, so you cannot get Blake Coleman. But some of these guys are available. If they are, this would be a good week to add them. But what we're going to do next is we're going to take a look at some of the other teams all into one. So I'll just look at the pre-filtered player hub, and we'll go through some guys that are available on some of your waiver wires. We'll start with the shallow leagues, and then we'll do deep leagues. And we'll start off this segment by looking at Sam Bennett. He is a Bangers League must-own. Not a lot of points in the last 4 games, 2 points in his last 4, but 19 shots and 15 hits in those 4 games. You can see 2.35 hits per game, getting some power play time and some shot volume. He's a peripheral darling. That's why he's an 81 on the completeness rating, and he is the highest rated completeness rating player that we're looking at right now, and he's only 31% owned. So this is probably your best ad going into week 21 because he's extremely complete, getting you a lot of peripherals. If you're in a points league and you get some points for shots and hits and blocks and those type of things, he's going to get you a nice floor. If you're in a categories league, he's going to cover those categories, and then anything that you get offensively is a bonus. Now, same type of player, but a little bit different in terms of what he's good at. Boone Jenner, 53% owned. He's dual eligible, which may explain why he's 53% owned instead of 31. 10 points in his last 10 games, 2 of those on the power play, and he does a little bit of everything in terms of hits, 2.04, 1.27 blocks per game, 2.8 shots per game. He's a really good shot volume guy, and he is scoring goals at a really high rate, so 94th percentile there, 19 goals in only 45 games. He missed some time due to injury, and he is one of the guys that I usually look at in terms of Columbus ads. He's probably the best fantasy player from Columbus, most consistent, and he's going to get you the nice floor that you want with those peripherals. Now, up next, we have Charlie Coyle. They have a 4-game week as well. He's one of the next players that you can look at. We obviously have Dursey, who we've covered earlier. But for Coyle, it's not a lot of crazy offensive production. 0.81 points per game is pretty good for him. 5 points in his last 6 games. He's getting some power play time, 3 power play points in the last 6. So that's nice to see. Shot volume is a little bit low. Anything under 2 is something that I kind of stay away from normally. But you are getting 1.4 hits per game and 0.66 blocks per game. So in a decent week for Boston where they have 4 games, this could be a nice volume play as you're going to get a little bit of everything out of Charlie Coyle. You pretty much know what you're going to get out of both him and Pavel Zacha as those 1A, 1B centermen that they have. And there is a deep league target that we have from Boston in the next segment as well. Now, a lot of these guys are very complete, and we're going to talk about Ryan O'Reilly next. You can see Krause here. He was one of the next best players. You do have Werenski, whose ownership is climbing, but we're going to touch on Ryan O'Reilly. He's got 4 points in his last 4 games, a power play point in there as well. Power play production is elite level, which is something that you can't really find on the wire, which is why he's 64% owned. But right now, Nashville is one of the hottest teams in the NHL, 7 wins in a row. And he's number 1 center, and he's top line power play. So if you're in a shallow league and you can go out and get him in a 4-game week, I know his player trend looks pretty up and down, but basically he's going between a 74 and a 78, which is still really consistent in terms of what he's doing on a peripheral level, or at least giving you that nice floor. Same point per game as Charlie Coyle, but you're getting a lot better power play numbers and some better shot volume as well. A little bit more goal scoring and assists from O'Reilly, and you're getting that exposure to Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi, who were 2 of the hottest players in the league last week. So really good exposure for O'Reilly if you can go out and get him. I understand he is relatively owned up, so you may not be able to get him, which would then lead you to another player that hits quite a bit. Braden Shen, 36% owned. Nothing going on in his last couple of games. But we do have that, basic floor that you're going to get out of him. He's going to hit everything that moves, 2.17 hits per game, 87th percentile there, just under 2 shots per game. So not what I like to see in terms of shot volume. Half a point per game is a little bit underwhelming as well, but you are getting that hitting floor, and you're getting exposure to the top 6 in St. Louis. St. Louis needs to make a push for the playoffs right now. I don't know what they're going to do with Pavel Buchnevich at the deadline. If they're going to hold him, if they're going to trade him, that could increase Braden Shen's ice time, and he is dual position eligible, so that's why we're mentioning him here. A number of other guys that you definitely want on your team, but they're relatively owned up: Robert Thomas, Clayton Keller. You have Nazem Kadri, who had a beautiful goal last night, but they're all owned up. But you can get access to Seth Jones. We'll look at him at the bottom here. 2 assists, a power play point, 16 shots, and 9 blocks in his last 4 games. You're getting elite level defensive shot volume from him. You're getting a hit per game and 2.2 blocks per game. And if you wanted Seth Jones at the beginning of the year for the exposure on the power play to Connor Bedard, Well, now's the time to get him because he's only 48% owned. You're still getting that exposure to Bedard, who is now healthy and producing. So you can go out and get Seth Jones at 48% owned in a lot of 12-team leagues. I would definitely advise that if that was what you wanted at the beginning of the year. Now, both guys are healthy. They're both playing relatively well, considering the team that they're on. But you do have Seth Jones as the power play 1 quarterback. If you're looking for a different type of defenseman, I would definitely urge you to look at either Colton Parayko or Jake McCabe. So we'll start it off by looking at Parayko, trying to find him down here. We might have skipped over him a little bit. He's further up. But Parayko's got no points in his last 5 games. You're mainly just getting him for shots and blocks, a couple of hits in there as well. 15 shots, 8 hits, and 18 blocks. As I find his player hub, you can see right there, 2.63 blocks per game, 1.28 hits per game, and he scores some goals. 9 goals in 60 games is pretty good for a defenseman. So you get that offensive outburst every now and then. You don't have it right now, so maybe it's coming soon. But you do get that shot volume and the blocks over the last 5 games. That's been something that he's continued. So you do get that out of Colton Parayko. You also have Justin Falk, who's around 50% ownership. You could go after him if you want a little bit more power play exposure. He just doesn't have that many power play points this year. He did last year, just doesn't have it this year. 2.23 shots per game is decent. Hits and blocks are pretty comparable, but you're getting a lot more blocks out of Parayko and more goal scoring. So that's why we're featuring him here. And then you also have Jake McCabe. This is a guy, there's not a lot of Leafs that you can actually get access to that you would want. Basically all their scoring comes from the top 6. But in terms of hits and blocks D, Jake McCabe is one of the better options in a 4-game week for Toronto. 2.89 hits per game, 95th percentile there. 1.83 blocks per game is 73rd percentile there. He's got 22 hits and 10 blocks in his last 5 games to go along with a goal and 2 assists. So he is still relatively productive offensively, but he's always giving you those hits and blocks. And in a week where you're going to get it in volume in a 4-game week, this would be a perfect time to go out and pick up Jake McCabe. Now, up next, we're going to take a look at some of the deeper league value that you can find on the waiver wire, and we'll look at some guys who are under 15% owned. We'll start it off with Nick Foligno, who is giving you that Bedard exposure. He's not necessarily playing 5-on-5 with Bedard all the time, but he is getting some power play time. 9 points, 3 of those on the power play in his last 11 games to go along with 30 hits, 92nd percentile in hits, 2.69 hits per game. So he's getting some offense, 14 goals on the season, 13 assists, but he's getting a ton of hits, which is why you would mainly own him. Every now and then he'll go off for some points. He has been relatively productive over the past number of games up until the last 2 or 3. He was scoring pretty much every night, either a goal or an assist, and then he's adding in those hits on top of that. And only 8% owned. He's definitely worth a look in a really deep league format, as are most of these guys. Now, if you want some of that Boston exposure, this is where I would recommend Morgan Geekie. So he's been one of those guys that can go off at any time. I believe he had a hat trick at some point in the last couple games. 4 goals, 1 assist, 5 points, and 9 hits in the last 6 games. He's dual position eligible, which is nice, center, right wing. And he is going to get you some hits, 1.55 average on the season. He's getting a little bit of power play time, 8 power play points on the season. Just not a ton of shot volume. That's what I don't like about him. And he is kind of a depth player, so I don't particularly like him in terms of a 12-team league. But if you're in a 16-teamer or anything bigger than that, this would be an opportunity to pick up Morgan Geekie, who seems to be playing pretty well heading into the trade deadline discussions. Then you also have Colton Sissons. As I mentioned, Nashville is one of the hottest teams in the league, and whenever they're playing really well, I would go out and try to pick up Colton Sissons, even in a 12-team league, because he can get hot. 6 points in his last 6 games. He's 9% owned. You're getting 1.79 hits per game, 0.73 blocks. Shot volume a little low for my taste as usual. Half a point per game is a little low as well. But when he goes on these streaks, 6 points in 6 games, and Nashville's red hot, he is getting some power play time as well. So this would be an opportunity to pick up Colton Sissons. If you're in a deeper league, he would probably be favorable for my money over Geekie and maybe even Foligno, just given the fact that he is on fire right now and getting some opportunity in the top 9. Now, if you're looking for a defenseman, obviously you're not going to have the Paraykos and the Seth Joneses that we just talked about, but Timothy Liljegren is getting you some peripherals. So 7 assists in his last 7 games, 3 power play points, which is interesting, but 12 hits and 11 blocks in that time span, 1.4 hits, 2.12 blocks per game. So getting a ton of blocks, getting some hits, a little bit of power play exposure, and some assists. Obviously playing with those elite level players, if he just makes a good breakout pass, that could lead to a couple of points. If you roster him on your roster, he's only 6% owned, so he is relatively available for you. Now, in terms of goal scoring, Kirill Marchenko is a guy I've been picking up in the Creators League every now and then. I have him right now, and he's one of those guys that goes off in stretches. So you can see here in the player trend, down, up, down, up, down, up. Basically, when he goes, for one of those games where he puts up a goal and an assist, as he did against the Rangers on Wednesday, that's when he gets those breakout bumps to the upside, but then he kind of goes cold for 2 or 3 games and goes down a little bit. That seems to be happening right now. 3 points in his last 5 games, 12 shots though is nice to see. 2.5 shot per game shot volume is good for a guy who's only 10% owned, so that is nice to see. He is getting power play time, 10 power play points on the season, and he scores a decent amount of goals, 17 on the year. For a guy who's only 10% owned, I would definitely take a shot on Marchenko if you're looking for pure offense. Now, this player, Ryan Pulock, up next, he is not a guy that has a particularly good schedule this week. They do have a 3-game week, but I did want to mention Pulock because he is one of the hottest players in terms of peripherals that you can get. So you can see down there, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points in his last 6 games, but he's got 12 shots, 8 hits, and 18 blocks. That's an average of 3 per game over that stretch. On the season, he's averaging 2.67 blocks per game, 97th percentile there, just a shade under 2 hits per game. So for hits and blocks, he's been really productive, and he's getting a little bit of shot volume over the last 6 games, averaging 2 shots per game instead of this 1.56. He's got a couple of goals on the year as well, so that's nice to see. 4 goals on the season. He's got that bomb from the point, and they're going to need him if they're going to make a playoff push. They have to start producing. They've got to start stringing wins together, and Pulock is one of their top 4 defensemen who's going to be relied upon. At 5% ownership, I can't believe he's that low, but for the hits and blocks coverage that he's giving you right now and some offensive production over the last 6 games, I would definitely take a shot on Pulock. If you're just looking for hits, that's where we're going to talk about Luke Schenn. So we mentioned his brother, Braden. We're going to look at Luke Schenn right now, and he is a hits monster. We have both Schenns here. That's Pulock and Schenn. So just to compare them, you can see 99th percentile in hits for Luke Schenn, which is crazy good. As we take Pulock out, you can see that he's been trending up basically since December, but a lot of that is just coming in terms of hits. 3.26 hits per game, 99th percentile. I believe he's top 5, maybe top 3 in the entire NHL. He's got 39 hits in just the last month. 10 blocks, 21 shots on top of that. The shot volume is relatively low. He does score every now and then. He does have a goal in the last month, but other than that, you're not getting a ton of offense. You're just getting Luke Schenn for hits. In a 4-game week, this is why you would add him, just for the hits volume if you're in a categories league and you need to come back with that category. So Luke Schenn, 12% owned. Hits is basically all you're going to get from him, but if that's what you need, you're going to get a ton of them from Luke Schenn. Now, up next, we're going to switch it over and take a look at some of the goaltenders that you can add this week. We'll start it off with a conversation I've been getting a lot in the Discord group. What do I do with Joey Daccord? You can see Daccord still up here 4th on the goalie hub, but he's been going backwards. So minus 3.4, and Philip Grubauer has been playing much better lately. Pretty much the best he's played as a Seattle Kraken. 2 wins in his last 3 starts, 1.5 goals against, .937 save percentage. You can see his ownership going from 14%, the arrow is supposed to be up here, to 27%. So he has rocketed up the boards. You can still go out and get him, though, if you're looking for a starter. Seattle has a decent playoff schedule for certain playoff leagues. If you're in, I believe, week 23, they have a good schedule with a couple light night games. And then week 26, they have a couple of light night games. And I believe they play 6 times total in that week 26 kind of combined 10-day week. So Grubauer could be an option for you. He is maybe one of the only starters that you can get access to right now. If you're looking for some spot starts this week, you do have Daniil Tarasov. So you have both goaltending options in Columbus. We'll start it off with Tarasov because he's lower owned. 3%, 2% ownership, 1 win in his last 3 starts, but really decent numbers. So 926 save percentage, 2.48 goals against, and he's improved quite a bit, but he's still really, really low. And that's why his ownership is so low. On the year, 888 save percentage, 3.6 goals against, but in a pinch, they're going to have to go to one of these guys in a back-to-back. You got Elvis Merzlikins at 24%. We'll take a look at him now. He's probably your better option if you're looking for a week-long stream instead of a spot start. But you can see here, he's been as high as 60 and as low as 46. Very inconsistent from Merzlikins. He's currently above expected, 1.6 above expected, and that's on the back of a really excellent last 3 games. So 2 wins, 2.02 goals against, 936 save percentage. So he's become maybe not a guy that you would hold on to longer term, but in a week like this, if you're going between the 2 guys, you could potentially add Merzlikins for maybe 3 games and then get Tarasov on the back-to-back if you wanted to go with both. I wouldn't necessarily recommend going with both, but those are some options for you depending on your needs. If you need another spot start, Spencer Martin has been playing really well for Carolina, basically since they picked him up off waivers. They have 97th percentile team defense, which is what you like to see. And then in terms of his raw numbers since coming over, 3 wins, 4 starts, 1.96 goals against, and a 909 save percentage is really nice. And in there, he had a game where he didn't play that well, had an 824 save percentage. So it's been even better than that in terms of the games where he's on. He's, save percentage would be above 920 if you take that game out. 3% owned, so he's available in every league format. And if you're in a deep league and need one of those spot starts, this is a team that is rolling right now. Carolina is winning left and right. They did give up the lead and lost in embarrassing fashion the other night, gave up a 3-0 lead in the third. But other than that, they've been really good over the last basically 3 weeks or so. Now, another team that is red hot that you can probably find a goaltender for you is Anthony Stolarz. You can see here he's in the top 20, slightly above of Ottinger, Ullmark, and Georgiev. That tells you how good he's been. 9.6 above expected. Team defense is really excellent, 94th percentile there. 924 save percentage on the year, 2.0 goals against. You love to see all of those things. And then on top of that, it's even better in the last 5 starts. 4 wins, 1.73 goals against, and a 930 save percentage. He would probably be your best spot start out of all of these guys. In this particular week, they do have a back-to-back. I can't remember which day it was, but they do have that back-to-back, so he will have to play 1 game. Bobrovsky, you can see here way at the top. I mentioned it last week. Can't believe to see him at the top of the list, but you also have Stolarz, who's playing really well whenever he gets in the net. Now, another hot team that we talked about, Saros, you can see here improving crazy from a 62 to a 75 week over week. Having a monster week. They've won 7 in a row, so that will do it for you. But you can also go out there and try to grab Lankinen. Lankinen is extremely low ownership, 1% owned. As I uncheck Saros, I have to re-add in Lankinen. And you can see 2 wins in his last 2 starts, 910 save percentage, 2.5 goals against. Obviously, you're not getting, consistent performance out of him. This would be a spot start type of thing, but at 1% ownership on a team that is red hot, relatively good defensively, 70th percentile team defense, this would be an opportunity to grab Lankinen if they have that back-to-back, which they do this week. So this would be the one time I would advocate grabbing Lankinen in a spot start. As I mentioned before, my best spot start option would be Anthony Stolarz, but if you can't get him and if you're in a deeper league, Lankinen would probably be your next best bet, as that team is much better than the Columbus Blue Jackets. So it would go Stolarz, Lankinen, and then one of these 2 guys for me in terms of a spot start. But if you're looking for a really reliable backup option who doesn't get in that much, you can look at James Reimer. It's been going on for a while now. He just doesn't start a lot, so that's why his numbers are not that great, and that's why his goalie trend is a little weird. But 3 wins in his last 4 appearances, 0.99 goals against, and a 969 save percentage. He has a shutout in there and a relief appearance where he went 6 for 6. So he's been really good when called upon for Detroit. They don't have that 4-game week this week, so the reason why we're mentioning him here is they do have that back-to-back, I believe Friday, Saturday. So he will probably get in one of those 2 games unless Husso miraculously comes back into the picture, but if it is Reimer, you can count on him for a really quality start. This video is getting long, so that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully you got something good and usable out of this. I hope I can get this video on the playoff schedules out before all of your playoffs start. I know some of your playoffs have already started, so we'll be working on that this week. Hopefully I can give you some information heading into your playoffs, and we can all get through with a championship belt. But that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next one.